Council, City of Nowland. It's Monday, October 25th, 2021. Turn on their microphones, please. Special meeting, City Council, Nowland, Minnesota, October 25th, 2021, 6 p.m. And stated agenda is communication meeting, identification and transition of staff responsibilities, and authorization to fill staff responsibilities on an interim basis. We call the meeting to order. And the first item up is communication.
Mr. Mayor, I would request that that item be tabled by the City Council. There are some communication issues between staff and the City Council. I think the City Council is well aware of those issues. The staff that has resigned has put their concerns in several different letters or letters of resignation, and in a letter that I received today that was emailed to me, that was sent by mail to each of you as council members. The letter that I received this afternoon says that we've been advised to notify you that we have sought legal counsel, and one of our, and it goes on from there. Clearly, the employees are talking to a lawyer. The only reason to talk to lawyers is potential lawsuits. And therefore, my advice to you would be, moving forward here tonight, is that you table this action. There will be time for self-reflection. There'll be time for thinking about this and what could we do better at a later time. But right now, while this matter is ongoing, I advise you not to have communication with the employees regarding any grievances. You know what their issues are. They've put it in writing to you. And even with staff that is not presently resigning, I still would say it's not in the council's best interest, individually or as a group, to have any discussions at the present time regarding any of these topics, because basically anything you say would be used against you. So as your counsel, as your legal counsel, my advice to you would be to table this matter and revisit this at another time. And right now, there will be a time for you guys. You do have to address these issues. You have to figure out what you're doing here moving forward. But right now, I believe that's not the appropriate time.
Well, it's been going on for 16 years, so when is it going to stop?
So this is not a public hearing, thank you. With that statement from the attorney, do I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Raymond.
I would move as stated by attorney, and his advice is that we remove the communication piece to tonight's meeting.
Have a second. I will second. Do we have discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
what will we be discussing then tonight?
Identification and transition of staff responsibilities in light of the resignations, and authorization to fill staff responsibilities on an interim basis. I agree with the attorney. There will be an opportunity. I think certainly having able to hear from staff that it is being retained. I think it's important to have at least an interim administrator of some sort in to be able to facilitate whatever discussions we do have. And so it seems to be the more appropriate time for that. So there will be an opportunity, and I'd say likely as soon as we get an interim, to have those discussions.
Mr. Mayor, this seems pretty crazy to me. We have a whole room full of people to talk about
Councilmember Alders.
communication, and literally, we are going to table the item that we said everyone should come out for. We have two staff members.
We didn't say everyone should come out for it.
It's an open meeting. They can
Open
come.
meeting.
So
And-
we have two staff members that may have an opinion, and we should let them talk. I don't agree with the recommendation.
And
Councilmember Alders.
You were, as the mayor would say, you're not on the city council, so this is a city council discussion. There's a motion and a second.
And I certainly can recognize speakers. He's representing the city as the attorney, and We hire him to handle
Well,
things
who's
like
paying
this.
him? Before we get past the meeting.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
if we go ahead and discuss the items on the agenda, could we implicate ourselves and then subject ourselves to legal reprimand?
You're talking about the identification of and transition of staff's responsibilities?
The part that we're,
Communication.
the part that we're trying to table.
I'm sorry, so ask your question again?
Yeah, so the part that we're trying to table, if we leave it on and we discuss it, are we gonna implicate ourselves as a city and possible legal action?
I will defer to our city attorney on that, because that's what we pay him for.
I believe, Councilmember Greenberg, that yes, that is why I'm recommending to you that you do table it. I do believe any comments that are made by staff will be potentially used against you in any potential future litigation. I also believe that any statements that you might make, either in defense of your actions that are alleged against the city council, or in responding to any questions and stuff from staff or comments from the public, could implicate you in future litigation. That is why I'm suggesting at the present time that you not address this topic.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Blake.
I have two questions. We did send out this as a this is how it was presented, it's a communication meeting. We didn't cross that out. We said this was a communication meeting. So we're under false pretense, so to speak, to say all of a sudden we change in the middle stream, which I don't think bodes well. And secondly, I don't think the council needs to respond to whatever the staff member who's staying on might have to say. None of us need to say anything in rebuttal. If that's going to cause trouble for us as a council, then we need to be quiet after his comments and let it ride and go on to our next action.
First of all, when this was noticed in the previous month, back in September, this was for communication between the clerk treasurer and the council, not all staff. This was not,
It was all staff.
It was all staff, all staff.
I don't
Yes.
see that anywhere on here, and I don't see that,
It's always been all staff and council.
you know, we've been having these meetings throughout the summer, and it's not been all staff.
We haven't had any communication meetings.
This is the problem.
You're twisting things.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
I would be comfortable with what Councilmember Linda Blake said if we, on our behalf, refrain from commenting on this particular subject, but we allowed city staff Joe Glaze to speak his mind, yet those who have put forth the litigation remain quiet. I would be for that idea. What does our legal representative think about that?
I would still respectfully suggest that you not engage this topic. Anything that is said will either be in furtherance of the allegations contained in made in the various letters that we've received from the departing staff members. I do not see a benefit from the city at the present time. I think the city is well aware of what the issues are that needs to be addressed at some point in time. And this has been going on these issues have been going on for a while, these allegations, so to speak, contained in these letters. They do probably need to be addressed at some point in time. I just don't think it's appropriate to do so now, because anything that is said, either to you or by you, could potentially be used by somebody in potential litigation. And could you individually be named? Yes. Could the city just be named? Yes. I don't know how that would work out, but I do know that if you do get sued by a staff member or somebody else, you will be covered by the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust. But we also have a duty to that League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust to try to not hinder them with regard to any potential litigation. And by having these things said, at the present time, may do so. We're trying to preserve all of the city's rights and all of the league's ability to fully defend us. That's why whenever there's litigation, you always hear people on the news saying we can't comment on it because it's litigation, it's potential. There's a shot across our bow right now. You were told, we've talked to lawyers. That is enough for me to tell you that this is not something you probably want to talk about. And that is different than when this was set up. When this was originally contemplated, I'm assuming, as a workshop, there wasn't this potential issue. But now there is. That's why I'm coming out and saying this. It's up to you guys, though, as a body. You can make your decision, and I'll respect that. But you also asked me for my professional advice, and I'm giving it to you. And anytime there's litigation, the less said, the better.
Attorney Ruby.
Excuse me, it's not a public hearing.
I'm sorry, I'm staff.
No,
I know
it's
my
not a
legal-
public
I know my
hearing.
legal rights, okay? If my name is on a document that says I am filing a lawsuit, I did not file a lawsuit. So legally, I did not do that. So if I'm on a document, I should know that somebody is misrepresenting me.
You're not.
You're not on the documents.
Okay.
she should be allowed to speak.
No, it's not a public hearing.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Blake.
what bothers me is the very comment you just made where you said, we should probably address these issues. This is the problem we've had forever among the situation here. We should probably, it never gets addressed and nothing changes. And that's why we're losing our staff. So to say we should probably does not suit me well at all. It isn't probably anymore. It's a must.
I understand, but you're still facing potential litigation. I can't get by that fact. I understand if the staff was going to stay in place, and this was something, and again, I think it is a worthwhile endeavor to address the staff's concerns. This staff, though, that are raising this, have already indicated that they're leaving. They've already resigned. They've already told you what the problem is. I don't know how you, given the allegations in the various letters that I've received, frankly, I'm not sure how you would respond to that. You know, the problem
Respond to
is
what? I don't
how, the grievances raised by the employees that are resigning in the various letters that I have seen. What I can tell you, Councilmember Lake, is that right now, those at least 2 out of the 3 that are resigning have signed a letter saying that they have talked to a lawyer and they are potentially looking at litigation.
Right.
And therefore, I guess it's a lawyer methodology. You circle the wagons. At that point in time, you do not go out and you do not talk about an issue. You do not address it. And even companies, you hear them say it, they're being sued, we can't speak. Even though it'd probably be a good PR move, they are not going to do it because there's potential for litigation and anything they say can and potentially will be used against them. That's why I'm raising this. I know it's not opportune time. I'm not saying that this isn't something you should not address in the future. I'm just saying not now.
And the lady will say if Jeff Murray resigns.
Mr. Rupi, or Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
Mr. Rupi, being that Joe Glaze is not on the suit, could he then speak because it isn't going to be a part of their suit?
It potentially will be a part of their suit. If he comes in and basically makes comments that bolster their claims or bolster their allegations, it potentially could be. I would say just don't go down this path. It'll all be handled, if there is actually a lawsuit, it'll all be handled in the discovery phase, and it'll all be handled at hearings and trials of this matter. It's just not appropriate to do so right now.
And if the only resolution to it is that a couple of council members resign, then we're not gonna resolve it tonight.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
Councilmember Elders, do you have any input on the discussions I just had with Mr. Ruby?
My opinion is I think we should let him speak, that's my opinion. Now, so, that's how I'm gonna vote, so I think there's nothing wrong with letting him speak, and I understand the risk, I also understand we have citizens that wanna understand what the transparency is, and if this thing gets to court and everything's in discovery, the citizens aren't really gonna understand what the hell's going on.
I'm not quite certain if it goes to discovery, why that would confuse
So,
residents, but.
that's my opinion. And
Mr.
I
Mayor,
agree with you
Councilmember
on,
Greenberg.
my concern is, I've read everything that our staff has put forth in their letters. My concern is more information coming forth now and being added to what's being said.
it's gonna come anyway.
Mr. Ruby,
If it comes, it'll come in the appropriate manner with an actual complaint that can be responded to and addressed by the League of Minnesota Insurance Trust. What we're trying to do is preserve all the rights for the city and its insurance carrier, given the fact that there is a valid threat of a potential lawsuit here. And that is, I mean, you understand why I'm saying it. They
understand.
actually said in the first sentence of this letter today, we have been advised to notify you that we have sought legal counsel. Why would you see legal counsel unless you are potentially going to take this to the next level? And again, I think this council understands from the comments that have been made by Joe here tonight and from the various letters what the issue is. I don't see a valid purpose for potentially taking away some rights that you guys might have or putting you in a worse situation than you already is from a legal perspective. I don't think you're going to gain any further knowledge about this right now. But again, you are right. It's the council's prerogative. You've asked me for my professional advice. I'm giving it. Now it's in your hands. What do you want to do?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainbow.
I would call the question.
Okay. We have a motion to table. We have a second. Until we have at least an interim in here so that we can actually discuss and bring resolution to the concerns that are raised. All those in favor of the motion to table, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
All right.
I,
Aye. We will not table.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
I think Joe Glaze wanted to have an opportunity to speak. We kind of thought that would be appropriate at this moment. The rest of us council will remain quiet on this particular subject. I think Joe, I think he has a legitimate, option to be able to speak, but I don't think we should take any action after those comments. We should just listen and then move on to the next items on our agenda.
All right, and how long do you propose this go on?
Typical public speaking is what? What do we allow? 3 to 5 minutes?
3
Three.
minutes.
Well, I think this is different than typical public speaking. This is giving them a communication, but probably shouldn't go longer than 10, personally, I think.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember
I'd
Rainbow.
like to ask Councilmember Greenberg if he could clarify when you said, we feel that Joe should speak. Who is we?
I would be in favor of that. Anyone of the other council members want to be in favor of that?
I'm in favor of it. 3 that voted.
Yeah.
I just, clarification if there was conversations beforehand or not. Thank you.
All right, so is it 3 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? Is it unlimited?
It's not unlimited.
It'll be short and sweet.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
can I ask the Attorney Rupi again to just give us advice again that this is not the route to go?
I think I made myself very clear tonight that from a litigation perspective, I do not believe this is the route to go, but I do recognize the council's right to take this decision, and I respect that, and I will defer to the council.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Alders.
I'm gonna say 5 to 10 minutes.
So you're saying up to 10 minutes.
Yep.
All right, Joe, the floor is yours.
My complaint, this is stuff that's been going on for 16 years. You've been harassing people, hostile work environment, micromanaging. 10 people has quit. I've heard different stories why, but the truth is, it's because of you or you and Mary. All the ladies will come back to work if you and Mary resign. You've been a pain. Both of you's been a pain since you guys got elected. We'd like to see you guys do the right thing and resign. That's it.
All right,
Short and sweet.
thank you for that. Now can we move on? Appreciate that support. Okay, now with the staff that has resigned, as you see from a recommendation that was before you from the League of Minnesota Cities, first item is identification and transition of staff responsibilities. A recommendation before us is to ask the staff to prepare a list of recommendations on what's important and immediate priorities that must be taken care of during this interim period, what has to be done now and what may wait. We can do about counter service, payroll, etc., and what can go on the back burner. We have the second item, we're calling a special meeting to discuss and make decisions on what needs to be done, what options we want to explore moving forward. The advice of the league is to have the attorney present. We have the attorney present to help answer questions about transition. They recommend an option of reaching out to neighboring cities and to the county to see if they can provide any interim assistance. Have the council discuss this and set some contracting parameters so there's not a delay in service. Retain an interim administrator as promptly as possible. Identify the nature of the work and the priorities of the role. Clarity of scope and intent is essential. And then make sure your financials are covered. They said one option is Abduak and Myers, but cover our financial services as we go forward. So I would like to recommend or move that the council would agree to ask the staff to prepare a list of recommendations on important and immediate priorities, what we're looking at immediately and what we're looking at in the next 2 months as we close out the year. So I would move accordingly. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The council had previously authorized Councilmember Blake and I to work on bringing in an interim. I would like to recommend, we have conducted one interview today. We have another interview scheduled for tomorrow. And should one of these candidates appear acceptable to Councilmember Blake and I, and those of you familiar with the council understand we're representing both sides of the spectrum here. But if we have a candidate that is acceptable and the contract could be approved by the attorney, I would like to have the authorization for our recommendation to move forward as an interim to start as soon as possible and look in the transition. So I would move that Councilmember Blake's and my decision on the interim would be acceptable to the council upon approval of a contract approved by the attorney.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Alders.
how does this interim process work? It's kind of new territory for me. So is it, we put an interim in place and then we do a further search for a full replacement, or does the interim fulfill that spot? How does that typically
No, the
work?
interim is typically, the league supplies a list of experienced administrators who are retired,
Okay,
and their job is to come in, keep things running smoothly, help council communicate what they're looking for, and then help search for a full-time replacement.
It's with the understanding that you're doing at the same time, you're looking for a full-time replacement.
And in this case, they would also work with us on staffing issues.
okay,
And their length of time is usually something that is negotiated with them, because they are retired, some have a limited time that they can give, and we just need to know if Councilmember Blake and the mayor find somebody that they believe would be a good fit and they have the time. And also the other things you have to think about is the distance. You know, some of these guys, you know, how far away are they and so forth. They're all experienced usually if they're on the league's list. But it's just a question as to, can we meet their
right.
terms?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Blake.
if the council's not comfortable with us making a decision, I mean, we can call a meeting and come back and everybody can make their, right? If you're not comfortable with
This
that.
delays the process, but yes.
That'll delay the process, but if that's what everybody wants.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
I'm comfortable with you and Councilmember Blake making a recommendation and moving forward with it in the interest of expediency. We have basically a week in which our interim to figure out the knobs and dials of the city, so we need to get them in as soon as possible.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I would concur with Councilmember Greenberg.
Me too.
Right, so a motion to allow Councilmember Blake and the mayor to proceed with obtaining an interim upon the approval of a contract reviewed by the attorney. It's a motion, do I have a second?
I second it.
A motion and a second, any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now, one of the, not knowing how quickly we can obtain the services of an interim, what I would like to propose as we close out this week is that if we can get an acceptable interim in the time, that we would like to have them come in and work with staff before they leave. If that's not possible, or even if it is possible, I would like to recommend that we have the city attorney, and currently we have administrative contract with the city of St. Francis to deal with our fire department. And I would like to recommend that in the transition here, we need to make sure that the fire department payroll is met and staff payroll is met, that we authorize the necessary paperwork to allow St. Francis to actually issue the paychecks. So normally we just turn in the time cards and we do the paychecks. And so to work out the details on what it would take for them to issue paychecks to city staff and to the fire department. And so have them participate, the City of St. Francis administrative staff, the attorney and potentially an interim participate with closing out the week with the staff. So that we would be able to hand off all appropriate codes, keys, transitional things that need to be done.
So is your motion to authorize City of St. Francis Administrator and staff to take any necessary actions to issue payroll until such time as an interim administrator can be retained to take over such duties?
Yes. And to have you and them and potential interim work with staff on the handing off of the responsibilities. To be arranged this week. So that would be a motion. Do I
Mr.
have a
Mayor,
second?
I would second
You
that.
guys resigned, he'd come back, so that'll be a win-win for everybody.
If we, Mr. Mayor,
A motion and a second, Councilmember Blake, discussion.
so if we are able, what did I tell you, is this thing making all that noise? If we are able to, pick somebody, hire somebody in the next 2 days, then that person would go into the office and get help from you guys to try to make the transition, correct?
We'd be happy to do that, yes.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Is the attorney gonna charge $150 an hour to work in the office? Legitimate question.
So we have a motion and a second, other discussion?
Why is the attorney in the office?
That was the motion.
It's a motion.
Okay, but I don't understand, why do we have to have the attorney in the office if we have the interim in there?
Just to make sure that there's a handoff. The interim, if at best, we hire them
Yeah,
on Wednesday, they're
Yeah.
coming in cold.
tomorrow maybe, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And so just from a transition standpoint, because normally it would be somebody representing the council that would be there. But knowing that that would not be acceptable to all the council members, my recommendation is it be the attorney representing the city in the transition and the handoff.
Well, maybe a council member can go in there, that wouldn't cost us anything.
And
Well,
can I,
is that a
can I say
possibility?
something?
No?
Am I allowed to speak on that? Mr. Mayor, am I allowed to speak?
You can speak.
The city staff is in no way going to leave the office a mess. We are residents of this community too. We care about the community and we care about what happens here. We are doing everything we can to be in order, have everything on top and complete before the next people come in. We have no idea who that is, but we are not, I think our reputation has spoken volumes with the residents and with our staff members, that we would not do that. Whoever's coming in, we will make sure that they are set up to do a good job and to succeed. Because our name is all over those documents too. We don't want to see somebody fail.
And this is not about anybody failing, but there's no expectation at this point that somebody can hit the ground running in that period of time and absolutely verify that we're gonna get payroll out. So I think having the people we've contracted with for payroll at a minimum for the fire department to be involved in that so they can write out checks, because not everybody can write out checks.
Right.
And so,
Unfortunately, I put my notice in 30 days ago, and we're just talking the last 3 days that we're in the office on finding somebody.
no, we aren't. It changed because in your notice, you said you were training other people to take responsibilities, and we just found out this last week that was changing.
Yeah, correct. 2 weeks ago, the rest of the staff resigned. I did not know
So
that
it
was
was,
going
it
to
was a
happen.
week ago today.
Yep, I did not know that was happening. So
Nor
the
did-
intent
nor did
when
we.
I put my resignation in was that I was going to train the staff so that there was a nice flow. When I left, they would know how to do it. They decided to put their notice in, and so we had a full week before this week now, today, when you're just starting to interview. We would be happy to help anybody if Linda Blake would like to come in, if Joel Greenberg would like to come in, if Councilmember Alders would like to come in. We would be happy to help them. They can watch what we're doing if we're training an interim, show you exactly where everything is.
But they would not be authorized to issue payroll.
That's correct. And we can
And
work
so-
with St. Francis for the payroll.
Right? So let's start with that. We would like St. Francis to come in, identify what they need in order to do payroll. And they'll do payroll for fire department and payroll for remaining staff.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
I like the idea of St. Francis staff coming in. They have experience in this area. And I certainly don't, my boss would wring my neck if I decided to help out in the transition. Anyways, we're swamped at work, and so I'm not available to help with that, so.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Alders.
have we reached out to St. Francis? Are they willing to do this?
They are contractually obligated on, as far as the fire department. We would believe that they would be willing to help on the rest of the payrolls as well. If council sees fit.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Alders.
does Councilmember Blake have bandwidth to help out in this transition over the next few days?
What do I do, just watch? See if there's anything illegal going on?
Not illegal. We need to know the transition. You know, who are keys being handed over to? Who are codes being handed over to? Who are bank accounts being handed over to? Who is taking the handoff on these multitude of things that the staff is carefully prepared to hand off to somebody, but doesn't have anybody to hand them off to?
Well, that would be your decision who you bring in. That's who we would hand it off to. We don't
And-
pick who we hand it off to, you tell us.
And that's why my recommendation is somebody who represents the city legally to handle it. If we have somebody that we've hired in that time, then we can do that. But we don't know that that's gonna happen between now and Thursday.
I don't trust Bob around pushing off.
Okay, so, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Blake.
if we get somebody in and we have the interim in, and we've hired him, and he can come up and start, then it would be all right for me to go and write down all these things, who they hand off to, right? But if we don't have that person in place in time, then you're saying Bob should do it. Is this what you're saying?
Yeah, separate from the St. Francis doing payroll.
Right.
And accounting.
The rest of it, if we don't have the right person in place for me to observe them, giving it to them, because they're not gonna give it to me, then we should have Bob there for them to give it to Bob? Is that what you're saying?
I am.
Because he's,
He's not a council member, and he represents the city legally.
I don't trust him around.
okay, so is this the way it's supposed to be? I don't know anything about it.
It's not a legal requirement, it's just.
We could give everything to you, Linda.
Yeah. That, what I would, Mr. Mayor, if I could.
I'll take all the
address
codes
the
that he's
council.
home.
Attorney Rupi.
One option you guys might want to think about, if City of St. Francis, if you have your administrator and there's somebody that's, retired, they've done this, they know what they're looking for. I understand, I cost money, and I'd much rather do a road project with you guys and be involved, but I'll do my job. One option you guys might want to think about is maybe asking St. Francis and maybe their city administrator to come over and work with staff for the transition, to meet with them, to get the, usernames, pass codes, keys, things that somebody that does this for a living might think about. Because Lori might say, oh, I think I got everything, and somebody from St. Francis might say, well, what about X? So you'd have to, do you do that electronically? Or what's the passcode? What's the username? All those things. So that might be would that be a good transition point, is to have maybe ask somebody from St. Francis if they could come over if they had a question, if they had a concern or problem, they could always give me a call. Other than last week when I got stuck in all the traffic construction, I'm usually about a half hour away. If there was something that came up that I had to be involved in, they could make that call.
Okay.
Otherwise, it'd be best for me just to stay out. But I do think you want somebody that knows what they're doing.
Right.
I think your interim, if they can be part of this, would be great.
Awesome. Yeah.
But if, you know how things work. If they can't, you want to have a backup. And I would suggest maybe asking the people at St. Francis, their finance director, their administrator, or both, to come over and work with staff to try and make a list of all the different things so that you would be, I mean, because everything nowadays seems to be done electronically. The problem I have with some of this stuff is I may not know what accounts even to ask for, or if I was even getting all of the information. Number two, it always is nice checks and balance to have somebody else who knows these things,
Right.
can ask a question. Lori, what about this? Can we get that from you? As well? Oh yeah, I forgot about that. And there's no ill will, it's just something that needs to be done.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Blake.
today, the one we interviewed, and there's no secret to this, he did say he would be able to come Wednesday afternoon, and if it didn't finish, he could come on Thursday for a couple hours. So, I mean, and then I could go in with him, or if I need to. The one we interview tomorrow, we'll see what he says. If he says that he can come in too, then we'll turn to St. Francis, right? Because we already got one that said he'll come over and get ready.
I still think we need to turn to St. Francis to make sure that
Well, yeah, I know, the St. Francis about the payroll. I agree 100%. But I'm saying turning over all the codes and the accounts and the
Well, you're
keys,
saying if neither of these guys are
not
acceptable and
available,
available,
then they do it.
then turn the keys over to St. Francis.
And yeah, then we'll ask we don't need to ask St. Francis about the transition with the keys and the codes and all that until we know that that the other guy, if we decide to choose him, won't be able to help us. But we already know the first one will come in. Okay? Does that make sense?
Can I,
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Blake, one thing just from a, personal, trying to understand people's personal lives and other obligations they might have, meetings scheduled, family issues, things, I would at least authorize somebody on the council to talk to St. Francis about this potential. And I understand what you're saying is, we hope we won't need it, but if we do, could you make yourself available?
Okay, yeah, that's
just
good.
as a, so they know,
Yeah.
they can be like me. I don't know if you're gonna need to be at that meeting or not, but reserve it. Don't give it away to somebody else.
Okay.
The other thing that I think you should probably be thinking about here, just on the interim thing, in case something falls through with these, is, and maybe this will be a separate motion, but also maybe hiring or authorizing the St. Francis administrator and to be the interim city clerk treasurer until such time as your interim administrator can be retained. Because you do want to have somebody that can sign documents for Liz, for planning and zoning,
Yeah.
things like that. So, and if they're willing to just step in and sort of pinch hit, I think that would probably be well worth your time. So I would, in addition to your motion to authorize St. Francis to issue payroll, I think there should be a second motion to authorize them to also be interim city clerk treasurer to take any action necessary in that role until your interim can be hired.
Well, and hired and up to speed, I think, is critical too.
Can we add to that, Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Blake.
We add that motion that you make that call, Jeff?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Mayor?
Any other, so we had a motion, do we have a second on that?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Green.
so to Councilmember Blake and Councilmember Alders, are you comfortable with Mr. Rupee being on, or should we, under the having St. Francis come over, should we just not have Mr. Rupee in the office then? I trust Mr. Rupee, he's represented us well. I also trust our city clerk and our staff, so I'm fine either way. But if the interim city clerk treasurer from St. Francis could kind of pick up those duties during this week, I think that would help cover us. And if we could get the interim in, Wednesday or Thursday, maybe that might be enough transition. And I think Mr. Rupee said he doesn't, quite know the knobs and dials as well as another city clerk would know. So I like that idea of seeing if St. Francis could help out this week and at least find out where all the documentation is and all the permits and all these things.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'm confused. Are we saying if we have our interim hired or chosen, and he's willing to come in on Wednesday and Thursday or whatever, we still want St. Francis to be in there? So we have both?
Right.
So
And I think that the question, as I'm hearing it, is not so much St. Francis. There's two things with St. Francis. They need to be in so that we can authorize them to do payroll for minimum fire department and potentially other staff payroll. If an interim can be contracted and gotten in that amount of time, then we can transition to them future signatures that are necessary for the city. Authorizations of permits and other things that come up.
But we are assuming St. Francis is gonna wanna do this, right?
That's the recommendation, that I contact them and find out. I would
We don't
assume that the initial is part of their administrative contract we already have with us. If we're gonna ask, as Attorney Rupee said, that we look at them as being an interim administrator until our interim is up to speed, till we have somebody actually hired, contracted, and up to speed, I'm sure there would be an additional cost of some sort. We'd have to have some kind of additional contract with them over the administrative contract we currently have that would cover something beyond the fire department.
For them to take that on.
And that's something that I can ask right away. I think their meeting schedules are opposite ours, so they would be meeting next week as a council. So.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
You go ahead,
Councilmember
Jason.
Rainbow.
Mr. Mayor, I guess I would ask council to consider to leave Attorney Rupee's name in the motion. If it's found it isn't necessary for him to be there, then he doesn't have to be there. But if we find it is necessary and his name is not there, we don't have that option.
Yeah, good.
So leave it up to Councilmember Blake and the mayor to determine whether or not if Mr. Rupee is needed, so to leave his name in the motion.
Okay.
So basically, just for my own purposes, I'm on call, basically.
Yes.
And you just, basically, you'd like me to reserve Wednesday and Thursday, that if I am needed to come over and help in some fashion, as determined by the mayor and Councilmember Blake, that I could answer my phone and not ignore it. Okay, yeah, I'll be happy to do that. Yeah.
That's comforting.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Alders.
clarity for me, so first thing we're gonna look at is, we're gonna try to hire somebody between now and Thursday to, do the handoff with the current staff. Along with that, we're gonna try to get the city of St. Francis to authorize fire department payroll and potentially staff payroll. If we can't get anybody Wednesday, Thursday hired with a decent handoff, we're gonna reach out to the city of St. Francis and authorize interim city clerk / treasurer duties. And if that all fails, then we're gonna phone a friend with our attorney here, and he's gonna go up there Thursday for the handoff and documentation.
That's what I understand.
and he would be on call for steps 1 or 2.
And then obviously, we'd be engaging him to review any contracts we'd be setting up with
Okay?
any interim, whether it's one of these people we're interviewing right now, or the city of St. Francis.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
I just, to clarify for myself, so are we saying that we don't want St. Francis to be authorized to be our clerk treasurer, even if we have an interim? Until that, I thought we talked about having, till the interim is up to speed, we have somebody, whether, I don't know how long that would be, but to have somebody with that experience of
My
doing that.
recommendation to you would be to have, see if St. Francis, and I don't know why they wouldn't extend that courtesy to you guys, to be the interim city minister, or city clerk treasurer, until such time as whoever you retain in an interim basis says they are ready to do it. You just don't want to have somebody that can't sign documents at the present time. So this way, legally, you're covered. They may never do anything, but you have them there as a backup to legally know that they can sign documents on your behalf. And then hopefully whoever the city council retains as an interim can hit the ground running, and we will not inconvenience. In terms of the handoff this week sometime, I think my advice, for what it's worth, is you may want to see if they would be willing to come over, and not that they're going to take keys or anything, but just another thing. Oh, what about this? Or what about that? I mean, let's do this one time, and let's see if we can get all the information. And more heads are better than one when you're trying to figure out, well, what about this? What about that? Somebody may think about something that maybe is unique to Anoka County that this interim administrator may not know about and things. I'm just trying to think outside the box a little bit. So my advice would be, if the city of St. Francis is available to come over and help for, we're talking an hour or two here, then ask if they can. If we can get the new administrator here, great as well, but at least we can try to do this correctly.
Other discussion? So, in the motion, clear that I can then contact St. Francis and see what that would cost. Right?
And the council is okay if they do want some sort of remuneration, leave that in the discretion of Councilmember Blake and Mayor Pilon?
Okay with that, Linda?
Sure.
Okay. So we have a motion, did we have a second?
I'd second that.
Have a motion and a second. Proceed, engaging St. Francis to be able to sign payroll and engage as a potential interim until the interim administrator is up to speed. And to have them work with staff in transitioning. And if an interim is available prior to staff's departure, have that interim also come in and work with the transition. All right. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, in addition, because we'll be short other administrative staff, we would like to authorize the interim to bring in at least temporary services to cover responsibilities in the office. And that could be working with neighboring cities, working with our existing contracted providers, the planner, the building official, the engineering, the legal teams, but to come in and figure out how we can cover other responsibilities, either by phone or in person. to work with interim, whether that's St. Francis for a short period of time or an interim that would be retained within the next week or so. But they would authorize them to temporarily staff those positions as they see best, starting with people that already know the city. That could be volunteers, that could be in person or through phone and electronic communications with other agencies we already work with. So it'd be neighboring cities, the county, whatever they see fit to appropriate there.
If this was going to be, staffed by city council members, it's authorized by law, but you'd have to do the conflict of interest affidavits if this is something that you looked at to get paid for. If you were volunteering your time to sit at the front desk to burn permits or something else, then that's fine. But if you are seeking to get paid, this is not a regular city council job duty. So therefore, under Minnesota law, we would have to have the council vote to authorize it. It basically is, it takes a unanimous vote of the city council with the interested person abstaining, and then you adopt a resolution authorizing it. And then it's no longer considered a violation of the conflict of interest rules. And the conflict is because you'd be receiving remuneration for that. And then if you are seeking, if you would not going to be seeking compensation, you just volunteer your time for during this period, then there would be no need for that.
I'll move to allow the interim, whether it's St. Francis on the short term or the new interim administrator, to engage staff appropriately to cover the responsibilities that they assume here at the city.
I second it.
A motion and a second. Do we have any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Does the council have anything else as far as authorization to fill responsibilities or transitional?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Blake.
we occasionally talk about volunteers. I mean, where would we get volunteers to work the office? I mean,
Well, what are you doing during the day?
oh, I see. There, you know what? I'm getting to be the catch-all girl
No,
here.
and I don't know. I mean, again, that's where the interim, if there are people within the city that they feel are appropriate, I think they'll probably go to
Yes.
outside services
Yeah,
first.
yeah, okay, yeah,
But-
because I
but,
just didn't know where
We
that
have
was
in the
coming
past
from.
where we've
No.
needed to cover phones or things like that. But it needs to be identified. If they were doing that, they'd be on a limited basis to just really direct people to, if you have this question, this goes to this
This person,
person, here's their phone number.
yeah,
And obviously, on an interim basis, from our discussions, that isn't necessarily going to be a 40-hour-a-week job, so.
yeah, okay, I get it. I'm just curious about that.
But it's possible that people would be willing to do that.
Mr. Mayor?
So on the council, anything else from the council?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
should we also allow the intern to determine based on staffing if the offices in the interim basis continued to staff for 40 hours or if we should cut back on hours during the transition?
I believe that's a reasonable thing,
Yeah.
depending on staffing, to not necessarily guarantee 40 hours. If it can be done, that's great. But if not, that they would communicate what is reasonable so we can get it up on the website. Obviously, it's important to have somebody keeping the website up to date so people will know. But You want to make that a motion?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion to authorize the interim to adjust hours as is appropriate, according to the staffing, the needs that they see and the staffing available. We have a second.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Other discussion?
I don't, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Blake.
I don't see how we're gonna get an interim that will put in 40 hours anyway. I mean, that's why they do this, they don't wanna put in that many hours, most of them, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that doesn't
So,
mean that they
That the
couldn't.
office
the
people
staff.
wouldn't put it in, okay, I get it. Yeah. All right.
All right, any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
That's okay.
Councilmember Alders?
Yes,
They want to make the second.
I did.
Council see anything else at this point?
I got a question for Ruby.
Mr. Mayor, if there are no
Councilmember
more
Rainbow.
questions, I would move
Miss-
to
I
adjourn.
have- Okay, I have one more thing, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Blake?
I just want to have on record that we appreciate Lori and Ellen and Lisa and the weeks, the time, the years you put into the city and your dedication, your hard work. And I know that your concerns were very sincere to see this city succeed. And we, as a council, do appreciate you, even though these are tough times, we appreciate you. We appreciate what you've done, and we want to thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rainville?
I move to adjourn.
A second.
We are adjourned.
They should have had everybody, they're cleaning up. We never get that.
Couldn't even get committee members to do it before.
What?
Couldn't even get committee members to do it.
Who's what committee would that be?
I'll let you guess.